The story might get interesting later on, so be patient at first. The Curse of the Night Monster. Daniel received a letter from Samuel on a cold autumn day, where the tree canopies had started to turn shades of yellow and red, creating a scene that seemed peaceful. The invitation to Duskvale, a remote village deep within the northern mountain range, piqued his curiosity. According to Samuel, this village was the perfect place to relax and escape the noise of the city. Samuel also mentioned that the village had a unique, untouched beauty and tranquility that no other place could offer. Daniel, a man who worked in an office job, was always caught in the hustle and bustle of life. Day after day of work and increasingly distant social relationships had left him feeling like a lost shadow amid the flow of life. After a few months of tension, he decided to put everything aside to find the peace and relaxation that Samuel had described. The day Daniel arrived in Duskvale, everything felt different. There was no sign of modernity, no paved roads, no towering buildings. It was as though the village had been buried in time, trapped in an unfamiliar space and era. The thatched roof houses were covered in green moss, with narrow, dark windows that seemed to refuse light from the outside. Though the atmosphere was eerily quiet, there was something vague in the air, as though an invisible mist hovered around. As Daniel stepped into the village, he couldn't help but feel that everyone was watching him with a strange, intense gaze. Their eyes were unfriendly, yet not openly hostile. The villagers didn't speak much, only offering a casual greeting before quickly turning away, as if trying to avoid something. The houses around him were all tightly shut, and the air around him felt suffocating with an eerie stillness. At nightfall, when darkness fell, a cold sensation enveloped the village. The full moon, shining like a silver mirror hanging in the sky, made everything under its light appear mystical. A faint mist began to rise from the ground, covering the village and making everything seem blurry. Daniel looked around, an uneasy feeling rising in his chest, though he couldn't understand why he felt this way. Before he could think further, Samuel appeared, hastily pulling Daniel into his house. Samuel was the only person who seemed familiar to him, and his eyes were filled with anxiety. The large wooden door was slammed shut, and Samuel looked around as though afraid someone was watching them. "You've heard of the ancient vampire, right?" Samuel whispered, his voice trembling. "They say it returns every full moon, hunting the people in the village. No one can escape it. The curse has been with this place for centuries, and now it's back." Daniel laughed. "A vampire? Samuel, are you joking with me?" Samuel didn't respond. He simply shook his head, eyes filled with fear. "You'll understand when night falls, Daniel. When the full moon rises, it will appear. This sight, I cannot forget." With all his curiosity piqued, Daniel couldn't ignore this strange story, although deep down, he still couldn't believe in such mysticism. But as the sky darkened and the full moon began to rise, Daniel decided to leave Samuel's house, stepping outside to witness what the villagers had always spoken of. As soon as he stepped out the door, a cold breeze blew past him, carrying the earthy smell of damp, abandoned fields. Everything around him was eerily silent. Even the wind was absent, only his footsteps echoed through the still air. As he walked past the houses, the lights from the windows seemed to go out, as though the whole village was in a deep sleep. Yet, there was something unusual in the air. Thick mist seemed to move, winding around his feet, making him feel uneasy. Then, from the darkness, a massive shadow flashed by. It was so fast that Daniel didn't even have time to register it, but the shadow seemed like a colossal creature, with wings as dark as ink, stretching across the sky. Its eyes were glowing red like fire, and the moonlight reflecting off its black form only enhanced its terrifying presence. A wave of fear spread through Daniel's heart, but he couldn't turn back. Because in the stories the villagers had told him, many people had disappeared every full moon, never to return. It was then that Daniel realized something incredibly strange. He seemed to have entered a world where even time itself could not change. He had to uncover the secret behind the curse and discover what had caused the ancient vampire to return, threatening the lives of all the villagers. That evening, when the full moon rose, Daniel was warned by the villagers not to go outside after nightfall. They told him of an ancient vampire, a terrifying creature that had returned after many centuries to hunt and kill the villagers. This monster was no ordinary vampire, but an embodiment of a curse from an ancient time, when a lord had sold his soul to gain eternal life and unimaginable power. At first, Daniel didn't believe the absurd stories, but as night fell, he began to hear screams echoing from the deep forest. A strange mist covered the village, and a massive dark shape flickered in and out of sight under the moon's glow. From that point onward, bizarre events began to occur. People in the village disappeared every full moon, and no one dared to leave their homes. In one foggy night, Daniel decided to venture outside, unable to withstand the overwhelming fear. He discovered a hidden cellar beneath Samuel's house, where he found an ancient book filled with accounts of the vampire and the curse it bore. He discovered that each time the monster killed someone, their soul would be sucked into eternal darkness, strengthening its power. The terrifying confrontation. On the next full moon night, Daniel decided to confront the vampire. He prepared his silver mirror, a sharp stake made from the trees of the forest, and other ancient weapons he found in the cellar. But as soon as he stepped into the forest, he felt the chilling presence of the creature. The vampire appeared, with pale skin and eyes burning red like fire, its massive black wings unfurling to obscure the sky. It wasn't just a terrifying creature, it was a magical entity with the power to control space and time. Daniel had to face brutal trials, and with every attack from the vampire, he gradually realized that this battle wasn't just about life and death, it was a fight for his very soul, to break the curse that bound the entire village. The scene around Daniel now became a living nightmare. Trees lay broken, dry leaves smoldering in the air, and the atmosphere was suffocating as if frozen by the vampire's presence. A terrible battle had unfolded under the full moon, with each sword swing and each blow of the vampire resembling an endless struggle between light and darkness. Daniel used everything he learned from the old book. He reflected moonlight with the silver mirror to weaken the vampire, forcing it to retreat. The stakes, made from the forest trees, were the only weapons that could pierce its skin, and each stake left deep wounds, causing the vampire to roar in pain. However, despite each attack causing serious injuries, the vampire refused to fall, its red eyes showing no sign of fatigue. Bit by bit, Daniel felt himself being pulled into the abyss of the battle, each heartbeat like a strike to his chest, each breath like a punishment from painful memories. They grappled in a frenzy, the vampire screaming while Daniel struggled not to be consumed by its power. He knew that if he didn't win, his life would be just another nameless soul sucked into the darkness, forever imprisoned. Finally, with a decisive strike, Daniel plunged the final stake into the vampire's heart. A scream echoed through the forest, and the silver mirror's reflection caused the vampire's body to begin to disintegrate. It turned to dust, and the air around him seemed to lighten, as though the darkness had been dispelled. Daniel collapsed to the ground, exhausted and drained. Though he had won, he still sensed something remaining in the air. Something that never truly disappears. As the first light of dawn began to break on the horizon, its weak rays shone through the branches, and Daniel realized that something was still present in the forest. The silence did not feel real. A large shadow appeared in the dawn's light, not the vampire he had just faced. This sent a chill down his spine. The shadow was tall, its eyes burning red like fire, watching him intently. The presence was so haunting that his heart seemed to stop. The darkness had not left, it was only waiting, rising again from the souls that had not yet been freed. He staggered to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest, but he couldn't tear his eyes away from the figure silently standing in the forest. It seemed as though this shadow had existed long within the darkness, part of the curse he couldn't fully understand. It wasn't a creature, it was something far more bizarre, a manifestation of the destruction the vampire had left behind. This made Daniel wonder, had he truly defeated the vampire? Or was it all a facade, just another part of the endless cycle of the curse? As the dawn light grew stronger, the shadow still didn't disappear. In fact, it began moving slowly toward him. With each step, the space around it seemed to bend. Time itself seemed to freeze. Daniel felt a strange power emanating from it, something ancient, capable of controlling reality, an existence he couldn't explain. And just as the darkness drew closer, a small voice echoed from deep within his mind, like a warning. The vampire is dead, but the curse is never broken. It only takes on a different form. And you, Daniel, are just another part of this endless story. Daniel looked toward the shadow drawing near, and in that moment, he realized that his battle was far from over. This story had no end. Darkness would always exist, waiting for more souls to come, waiting for its turn in the eternal cycle of darkness. The only thing he knew for sure was that the dawn light could not banish all the darkness.